What if Sirius Black raised Harry Potter? Part 1. Sirius Black had never known a fear like this. His best friends were dead. James and Lily, gone in an instant. Their son, Harry, barely a year old, left crying in the wreckage of their home in Godric's Hollow. And Peter had betrayed them all. Sirius stood amidst the ruins, his wand clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Hagrid was there, too, enormous and grief-stricken, cradling baby Harry in his massive arms. "I have to take him, Sirius," Hagrid murmured, his voice hoarse. "Dumbledore's orders. He's to go to his relatives." Sirius's mind reeled. Relatives? He knew exactly what that meant. The Dursleys. James had spoken about them once or twice, always with disdain. Petunia Dursley, Lily's Muggle sister, had cut ties with her long ago. There was no way in hell Sirius was letting James and Lily's son be raised by those people. "No," he said, his voice steel. "Harry's coming with me." Hagrid's brows furrowed. "It ain't up to ya, Sirius." "The hell it isn't." Sirius's heart pounded. He was Harry's godfather. James and Lily had entrusted him with their son, not Dumbledore, not Petunia. He had already failed them once by trusting Peter. He wouldn't fail them again. He took a step forward, reaching for Harry. Hagrid hesitated, torn between orders and instinct. "Sirius, you gotta understand," Hagrid said softly. "Dumbledore thinks it's safest for him to be with family." "I am his family," Sirius snapped. Hagrid's massive shoulders slumped. He looked down at Harry, who was sniffling softly against his chest. Finally, with great reluctance, he extended the child to Sirius. "Take care o' him," Hagrid murmured. "For James and Lily." Sirius swallowed hard, his throat tight, as he cradled Harry in his arms. "I will." With one last look at the ruins of his best friend's home, Sirius turned and disappeared into the night. The next few days were a blur. Sirius knew the Ministry would come after him soon, so he had no time to waste. He couldn't go back to his old home. It was the first place they'd check. Instead, he fled to Andromeda Tonks, his cousin, one of the only Blacks he still trusted. Andromeda gasped when she saw him standing at her doorstep, Harry in his arms. "Merlin, Sirius. What happened?" "James and Lily are dead," he said hoarsely. "I need a place to stay." She ushered him inside without another word. Ted Tonks, her Muggle-born husband, was already bringing out tea, his usual calm demeanor masking concern. Little Nymphadora, barely 8, peeked around the corner, her hair shifting colors in response to the tension in the room. Andromeda listened intently as Sirius explained everything. Peter's betrayal, how he had taken Harry, and how he was now a fugitive. "You can't stay here long," she said finally. "The Ministry will be looking for you. They'll think you were the secret keeper." "I know," Sirius muttered. "But I won't let them take Harry." Andromeda's sharp eyes softened as she looked at the child in his arms. "You're doing the right thing," she murmured. Sirius stayed just long enough to come up with a plan. He couldn't keep Harry safe if he was constantly on the run. He needed a home, one where they wouldn't be found. That's when the answer came to him. Grimmauld Place. The moment Sirius stepped inside 12, Grimmauld Place, he felt the weight of the Black family's dark history pressing down on him. The house was cold and lifeless, the air thick with dust and the echoes of the past. The old Black family portraits sneered at him as he passed, and the shrunken heads in the hall muttered insults under their breath. Sirius ignored them all. This house had never felt like home, but now it would be one, not for him, but for Harry. Creature, the family's bitter, wrinkled old house elf, scuttled into view, his beady eyes narrowing. "Filthy blood traitor returns," he muttered. Sirius clenched his jaw. "Shut it, Creature," he snapped. "I live here now, and so does Harry. You'll do as you're told, or I'll throw you out." Creature bared his yellowed teeth but said nothing. Sirius sighed and looked down at Harry, who stared up at him with wide green eyes. "This is home now, kid," Sirius murmured. "Not perfect, but it's what we've got." Harry cooed softly, reaching out and grabbing a fistful of Sirius's robes. Something warm spread in Sirius's chest. He had no idea how to raise a child, let alone the boy who lived. But he would learn. He had to. For James. For Lily. For Harry. The years that followed were far from easy. Raising Harry in Grimmauld Place was like trying to raise a flower in the middle of a battlefield. The house itself resisted every effort to make it warm and livable, and Creature remained as spiteful as ever. But Sirius was determined. He refused to let Harry grow up in a cold, loveless environment. He filled the house with laughter, turned old rooms into play areas, and even learned how to cook, badly, but with enthusiasm. Andromeda and Ted visited often, offering help and advice, and Remus Lupin, the only other marauder left, came as often as he could. Despite the Ministry's belief that Sirius was a traitor, they had managed to stay hidden. Sirius kept a low profile, only leaving the house when absolutely necessary. The wizarding world believed that Harry Potter had vanished after his parents' deaths, but in reality, he was growing up in the shadows of a house that had once been filled with darkness. Harry was different from the other children his age. He grew up surrounded by magic, but not in the strict, controlled way of most wizarding families. Sirius encouraged curiosity, mischief, and independence. He told Harry stories of the Marauders, of James and Lily, and of the world they had fought for. And when Harry, at 5 years old, looked up at him one night and said, "Padfoot, what happened to Mummy and Daddy?" Sirius knew he couldn't hide the truth forever. He took a deep breath, ruffling Harry's messy black hair. "They loved you more than anything," he said, "and they died protecting you." Harry's little brows furrowed. "From bad people?" Sirius nodded. "Yeah, kid. From bad people." Harry was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took Sirius's hand in his small one. "You won't let them get me, right?" Sirius swallowed the lump in his throat and squeezed Harry's hand. "Never." And as he looked into those bright green eyes, Lily's eyes, he made a silent promise. He had lost everything once. He wouldn't lose Harry. Not ever. Sirius had never imagined himself as a father figure. He was barely out of his reckless youth when he took Harry in, and at first, he stumbled through the role like a blind man in the dark. But as the years passed, something changed. Taking care of Harry wasn't just an obligation, it became his purpose. By the time Harry turned 6, he had grown into a bright, inquisitive child with an endless supply of energy. He ran through the halls of Grimmauld Place with untamed excitement, his laughter breaking through the oppressive silence that had once ruled the house. Sirius encouraged his adventurous spirit, though sometimes it led to moments of chaos. Like the time Harry nearly set the library on fire. Sirius had stepped out to deal with a few errands, leaving Harry under Creature's reluctant watch. When he returned, he found thick smoke billowing from under the library doors. "Merlin's bloody beard, Harry." Sirius burst through, his wand raised, expecting to see disaster. Instead, he found Harry standing in the middle of the room, looking both guilty and fascinated, holding his tiny wand, a gift from Sirius, despite knowing it wouldn't properly work until Hogwarts. A pile of scorched books smoldered beside him. "I was practicing," Harry admitted sheepishly. Sirius sighed, rubbing his temples. "Kid, I love your enthusiasm, but you nearly turned the whole house into a bonfire." "I didn't mean to," Harry muttered, toeing the floor. Sirius crouched down and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Magic isn't just about trying spells until something cool happens. You need control. You need patience." He paused, then grinned. But that was a wickedly powerful attempt. James would have been impressed. Harry beamed, the worry vanishing from his face. "Really? Really? But next time, let's not turn my books into ash, yeah?" Harry nodded eagerly, and Sirius chuckled. He could never stay mad at the kid. One of the biggest challenges Sirius faced was teaching Harry about the world while keeping him hidden from it. The wizarding world believed Harry Potter had vanished after his parents' deaths. The Ministry was still convinced that Sirius was a traitor. If anyone found them, Harry would be ripped away from him. So, Sirius had to get creative. He couldn't take Harry to Diagon Alley like other children, but that didn't stop him from teaching him about magic. He transfigured household objects into creatures, turned dinner into dueling lessons, forks made excellent makeshift wands, and told wild stories of the Marauders' mischief at Hogwarts. But the biggest lesson he ever gave Harry came when he was 7 years old. It started with a question. "Padfoot, why don't we ever go outside?" Sirius froze. He had been reading the Daily Prophet at the kitchen table while Harry practiced levitating an old quill with wandless magic. His grip on the paper tightened. "You don't like it here?" Sirius asked carefully. "I do," Harry said. "But I want to see more." He frowned. Other kids get to go places. Sirius exhaled slowly, setting the newspaper down. Harry, listen to me, he said, his voice serious. There are people out there who would take you away from me. People who think I don't deserve to raise you. Harry's emerald eyes widened. Why? Sirius hesitated, then said, Because they think I'm a bad person. Harry looked bewildered. But you're not. Sirius smiled faintly. No, but they believe I am. He leaned forward. There's a man, a very bad man, who betrayed your parents. But instead of him being punished, they blamed me. Harry's little fists clenched. That's not fair. No, it's not, Sirius agreed. That's why we have to be careful. You're safe as long as we stay hidden. Do you understand? Harry nodded, but Sirius saw the frustration in his eyes. He knew he couldn't keep him locked away forever. That was when Sirius made a decision. The next evening, under the cover of night, he took Harry outside for the first time. They apparat to a quiet, open field, far from the eyes of the wizarding world. The moment they arrived, Harry gasped. The sky stretched endlessly above them, shimmering with stars. The grass beneath his feet felt cool and real. A soft breeze rustled through his hair. It's beautiful, Harry whispered. Sirius knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. The world is yours to see, Harry, he said. And one day, I promise, you won't have to hide anymore. Harry looked up at him, determination in his young eyes. I'll get strong, Padfoot, so we won't have to hide. Sirius smiled, ruffling his hair. That's my boy. By the time Harry turned 8, Sirius had started preparing him for a world that neither of them could avoid forever. He taught Harry how to defend himself, not just with magic, but with his wits. He taught him how to sense danger, how to think on his feet. One day, he placed a small vial on the table. Polyjuice potion, he explained. If we ever get caught, you drink this, and you'll look like someone else. It'll buy us time to escape. Harry nodded, absorbing the information with surprising maturity. That same year, Remus Lupin visited more often. Harry adored him, and Remus, despite his usual reservations, grew deeply fond of the boy. You're doing well with him, Remus admitted one evening as he and Sirius shared a drink by the fireplace. Sirius smirked. Of course I am. I was born to be an excellent godfather. Remus chuckled. James would be proud. Sirius's smile faltered slightly, and he took a sip of fire whiskey. I hope so. They both looked toward the staircase, where Harry's soft breathing echoed from his room. He's going to be a great wizard, Remus said. Sirius nodded. Yeah, and when he goes to Hogwarts, the world will finally see that. But deep down, a nagging thought crept in. He had done everything to prepare Harry, to teach him, to keep him safe. But how long could he keep the world from coming for him? As the years passed, Harry grew into a confident, sharp-witted boy, shaped by Sirius's rebellious influence and Remus's steady guidance. By the time he turned 9, he was no ordinary child. He was fast, clever, and had a natural instinct for trouble, something Sirius both admired and feared. One evening, Sirius tested Harry's reflexes with a simple but effective lesson. He set up a magical trap in the hallway, a harmless but startling hex designed to trip up anyone who wasn't paying attention. Harry didn't fall for it. Sirius watched from the shadows as Harry stepped into the hallway. The boy's bright green eyes darted around, sensing something was off. He crouched low, picked up a small book from the floor, and tossed it ahead. A blue hex shot out, striking the book midair and sending it flying across the hall. Sirius grinned. That's my boy. Harry turned, unimpressed. Really, Padfoot? A tripwire spell? Sirius stepped into the light, smirking. Testing your instincts, kid. Harry crossed his arms. You keep doing that. And you keep passing. Sirius ruffled his hair, laughing as Harry tried to swat him away. One day, Hogwarts won't know what hit them. That was the problem, though, Hogwarts. It was only 2 years away now, and the thought of sending Harry into the heart of the wizarding world, where the Ministry still considered Sirius a fugitive, filled him with unease. But he couldn't keep Harry hidden forever. One night, as they sat by the fireplace, Harry asked the question Sirius had been dreading. What was my mum like? Sirius hesitated, swirling his fire whiskey before setting it aside. He looked at Harry, so much like James, but those eyes, those were lilies. She was brilliant, Sirius said finally. Sharp as a whip. Never let your dad get away with anything. He chuckled. She was fierce when she needed to be. But she had the biggest heart. Harry listened intently, soaking up every word. Did she love me? Sirius's chest tightened. He reached over and gripped Harry's shoulder. More than anything, kid. Harry swallowed hard, staring at the fire. I wish I remembered them. Sirius felt a familiar wave of guilt. If only he had been there that night. If only he had stopped Peter before he betrayed them. You carry them with you, Sirius said softly. Every time you stand up for yourself, every time you fight for what's right, that's them. That's your mum and dad. Harry looked down, his fingers curling into fists. Then I'll make sure I never forget. Sirius ruffled his hair. That's the spirit. As the months passed, Sirius and Remus worked harder than ever to prepare Harry for what lay ahead. They knew Hogwarts would bring challenges far greater than just learning spells. Harry needed to be ready, so Sirius taught him to duel. Real fights don't happen in a classroom, Sirius told him one evening as they stood in the drawing room of Grimmauld Place, wands raised. They're messy. You need to think fast. Harry grinned. I'm fast. Sirius smirked. We'll see about that. He flicked his wand, and a harmless stinging hex shot toward Harry. Harry dodged barely. The duel escalated quickly. Harry was fast, unpredictable, and determined, but Sirius was a marauder. He outmatched Harry at every turn, but the boy never gave up. Every time Sirius knocked him down, Harry got back up. Every time Sirius outmaneuvered him, Harry adapted. After an hour, they stood panting, wands still raised. Sirius wiped sweat from his brow. You're getting better. Harry grinned. I almost got you. Sirius chuckled. Almost. He lowered his wand. You're going to be brilliant at Hogwarts. But Harry's smile faded. If I even get to go. Sirius frowned. What do you mean? Harry hesitated. You always say we have to stay hidden. But Hogwarts, it's full of wizards. What if someone tries to take me away? Sirius clenched his jaw. Harry was right to be worried. We'll figure it out, Sirius promised. I won't let anyone take you. Harry nodded, but Sirius saw the doubt lingering in his eyes. A few weeks later, the first sign of trouble arrived. Sirius was reading the Daily Prophet when a headline made his blood run cold. Harry Potter, the missing boy who lived? The article speculated about Harry's whereabouts. Dumbledore had never revealed where Harry had been sent after his parents' deaths, and now, rumors were swirling. Some believed he had been hidden by the Order, others whispered darker theories. Sirius cursed under his breath. Remus, who had just arrived for tea, read over his shoulder. This isn't good. No, it's bloody well not. Sirius tossed the paper onto the table. If they start looking, it's only a matter of time before someone finds us. Remus exhaled slowly. We might need to talk to Dumbledore. Sirius scowled. You know what he'll say. He wanted Harry with the Dursleys. He'll try to take him. Remus hesitated, then said, Dumbledore isn't the enemy, Sirius. He just wants Harry to be safe. Sirius ran a hand through his hair, pacing. Harry is safe. For now. Sirius hated that Remus was right. That night, Sirius watched Harry sleep, his brow furrowed in deep thought. No matter what happened, he wouldn't let anyone take Harry from him. But deep down, he knew the world was coming for them. The morning after the Prophet's article, Sirius was already planning their next move. He knew the wizarding world wouldn't stop until they found Harry. That meant only one thing. They had to be ahead of everyone. We need to be ready, Sirius told Remus as they sat in the kitchen of Grimmauld Place. If they come looking, I won't be caught off guard. Remus frowned. And if it's Dumbledore? Sirius hesitated. Then I'll remind him that Harry is my responsibility. But he'll argue that you're still a wanted man. Sirius's jaw clenched. Then it's time we fix that. Remus raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of turning yourself in? Sirius scoffed. Not a chance. But I need to find proof, something that clears my name. He tapped his fingers against the table. If I could find Pettigrew. Remus sighed. Easier said than done. No one's seen him in years. Doesn't mean he's not out there. Sirius's eyes darkened. That rat has to slip up sometime. A small voice interrupted them. Are we leaving? Both men turned to see Harry standing in the doorway, arms crossed. He had been listening. Sirius sighed. Not yet, kiddo. But we have to be careful. Harry walked over, sitting across from them. I can help. Sirius and Remus exchanged glances. You're already helping, Sirius said. By staying smart, keeping your head down. Harry frowned. That's not enough. Sirius leaned forward. Harry, listen. The people looking for you? They're not all friendly. Some might want to use you, others. He exhaled sharply. Others might want to hurt you. Harry's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Like the man who killed my parents. The room fell silent. Sirius swallowed hard. Yes. Harry's jaw tightened. Then I need to be ready. Remus sighed. He's got a point, Sirius. Sirius pinched the bridge of his nose. You two are impossible. But after a beat, he nodded. Fine. We train harder. But I make the rules. Harry grinned. Deal. The next few months were relentless. Sirius pushed Harry further than ever. His dueling skills sharpened, his reflexes improved, and he learned the tricks most wizards wouldn't figure out until their 5th year at Hogwarts. But it wasn't just spells. Sirius taught him how to think, how to read people, how to predict their moves. One evening, as they sparred in the drawing room, Harry ducked beneath a hex and shot back a stunning spell. Sirius barely dodged. Nice, he laughed. But don't get cocky. Harry smirked. You always say that when I'm winning. Sirius rolled his eyes. Because that's when people make mistakes. They went again. This time, Harry feinted left before firing a disarming spell. Sirius's wand flew from his hand. Harry's grin widened. Gotcha. Sirius stared at his empty hand, then at Harry. Blimey, you really did. Remus clapped from the doorway. Told you. He's learning fast. Sirius shook his head, grinning. James would be proud. Harry's smile faltered for a second, but then returned stronger. So, what's next? Sirius smirked. Now, we make it harder. It wasn't long before trouble found them. One evening, while Sirius and Harry were out in Diagon Alley under disguises, Sirius noticed something, someone watching them. A tall, thin man in deep blue robes stood near the entrance of Flourish and Blots, eyes scanning the crowd. Sirius grabbed Harry's arm. Time to go. Harry didn't argue. Years of training had taught him to trust Sirius's instincts. They slipped through the alley's side streets, blending with the shadows. But as they reached a quieter corner, a voice stopped them. You've been hiding too long, Black. Sirius whipped around, wand drawn. Standing before them was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry's breath hitched. He had never met the man before, but he knew who he was. The headmaster of Hogwarts. The man who had tried to send him to the Dursleys. Sirius stepped protectively in front of Harry. I don't have time for this, Dumbledore. Dumbledore's gaze softened. I'm not here to take him, Sirius. Sirius didn't lower his wand. Forgive me if I don't believe you. Dumbledore sighed. The Ministry is getting restless. They will come looking. You cannot hide forever. I don't plan to, Sirius said coldly. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then let me help. Sirius frowned. Why would you? Because Harry's safety matters more than anything else, Dumbledore said simply. He turned his eyes to the boy. And because he deserves to know the truth. Harry tensed. What truth? Dumbledore's eyes flickered with sadness. About why Voldemort wants you dead. The alley was silent. Sirius's grip on his wand tightened. He had always known there was more to it. That James and Lily weren't just random victims. But he had never asked, never wanted to believe it was anything more than a tragedy. Harry stared at Dumbledore, his hands clenched. Tell me. Dumbledore hesitated, then finally spoke. There was a prophecy, Harry. One that spoke of a child who could defeat Voldemort. And that child was you. Harry's heart pounded. Sirius went pale. That's why, he couldn't even finish. Dumbledore nodded. That is why your parents were targeted. Harry's mind swirled. A prophecy. A destiny he never knew about. His whole life he had trained to fight to survive. But he had never thought about why Voldemort had come for him in the first place. And now he knew. Sirius turned to Dumbledore, eyes dark with fury. And you never told us? Dumbledore's face was unreadable. Because I was trying to protect him. Sirius let out a bitter laugh. Protect him? He's been hunted since the day he was born. Harry took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. So what now? Dumbledore's expression turned grim. Now, Harry, the world will come looking for you. And this time, they wouldn't stop until they found him. The weight of the prophecy settled over them like a thick fog. Harry's mind spun with everything Dumbledore had just revealed. He had trained all his life to defend himself, to be strong. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about destiny. Sirius stood rigid beside him, his fists clenched. "You should have told me," he growled at Dumbledore. "You should have told James and Lily." Dumbledore's expression didn't change. Would it have made a difference? Sirius let out a humorless laugh. It would have changed everything. Harry's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "So Voldemort wants me dead because of this prophecy?" "Yes," Dumbledore confirmed. "But there is more to it. The prophecy states that either you or Voldemort must be the one to end it. Neither can live while the other survives." The words settled heavily in Harry's chest. Sirius turned to him. "Harry." "I'm fine," Harry interrupted. But he wasn't. He had known his life was dangerous, that people were after him. But to hear it spelled out so clearly? To know that this fight wasn't just about escaping death, but about facing it head-on? It was different. Dumbledore looked at him closely. "I do not wish to place this burden on your shoulders, Harry, but it is yours nonetheless." Harry swallowed. "Then what do we do?" Sirius snapped his head toward him. No, you're not fighting this war, Harry. Not yet." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then when?" Dumbledore sighed. "Sooner than you think, I'm afraid. The moment Voldemort learns of your existence, he will come for you." Sirius took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Then let him try." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. "Sirius, this is bigger than just you and Harry." Sirius scoffed. "Harry is all that matters." Harry exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "We don't have time to argue about this." He turned to Dumbledore. "What do you want from us?" Dumbledore's eyes darkened. "To prepare." Sirius crossed his arms. "We've been preparing. Not like this." Dumbledore hesitated. "You are strong, Harry, but strength alone is not enough. You need knowledge, strategy." Harry frowned. "So you want me to go to Hogwarts?" Dumbledore nodded. "Eventually, the school will provide protection, and you will learn more there than anywhere else." Sirius shook his head. "Absolutely not." Harry's stomach twisted. A few days ago, he would have agreed. But now, knowing what he knew, could he afford not to go? Dumbledore's voice was quiet but firm. "Harry, you cannot run forever." Sirius's hand curled into a fist. "He's not running. He's fighting on his terms." Dumbledore sighed. "Sirius, you are an excellent guardian, but you cannot teach him everything." "I can damn well try." Harry clenched his fists. "Enough!" His voice echoed down the alley. Both men fell silent. He turned to Sirius. "I trust you, but I need to know more. I need to be ready." Sirius hesitated. Harry's green eyes burned with determination. "I don't want to wait for Voldemort to find me. I want to be ready when he does." Sirius exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He knew Harry was right, but the thought of sending him into Dumbledore's hands, into the spotlight, made his blood boil. Dumbledore gave them a moment before speaking again. "If you do not wish for Hogwarts, then at least let me help in other ways. There are things you need to learn beyond dueling." Harry glanced at Sirius. "What do you think?" Sirius was silent for a long time before finally sighing. "Fine, but only under my conditions." He looked at Dumbledore. "No tricks, no secrets. If we work with you, we do it on our terms." Dumbledore nodded. "That is acceptable." Harry let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Dumbledore adjusted his robes. "Very well. I will contact you soon." With a final glance at Harry, he turned and disappeared into the night. The next few days were tense. Sirius didn't talk much about their meeting with Dumbledore, but Harry could tell he was still uneasy. He didn't blame him. Harry wasn't sure how to feel either. His whole life, Sirius had taught him how to fight, how to survive. But if Dumbledore was right, if strength alone wasn't enough, then he needed more. And that scared him. One night, as Sirius sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames, Harry approached him. "You're angry." Sirius looked up, startled. "What?" Harry sat beside him. "You don't like this." Sirius sighed, rubbing his face. "Of course I don't. Dumbledore never tells the full story. And now he's dragging you into something bigger than you should ever have to deal with. Harry studied him. But I'm already in it, aren't I? Sirius exhaled sharply. Yeah. Harry leaned back, watching the fire flicker. Then we have to be smart. Sirius chuckled bitterly. You sound like Remus. Harry smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. Sirius shook his head, but his lips twitched upward. You're too much like James. Harry's grin faded slightly. Do you think he'd be proud? Sirius's eyes softened. He'd be furious that you have to go through this. He reached over, gripping Harry's shoulder. But yeah, he'd be proud. Harry smiled. Then that's enough for me. Sirius studied him for a moment before sighing. All right, we do this our way. If Dumbledore wants to help, we make sure we're the ones in control. Harry nodded. And if Voldemort comes? Sirius's eyes darkened. Then we make damn sure he regrets it. And for the first time since hearing the prophecy, Harry felt ready. The night was heavy with silence. Sirius sat by the window of their safe house, his sharp eyes scanning the darkened streets below. Harry was asleep in the next room, but Sirius couldn't rest. Not after everything Dumbledore had revealed. He had spent years preparing Harry for the worst, teaching him how to fight, how to think like a survivor. But now he knew it wasn't enough. Dumbledore was right about one thing. This wasn't just about dueling skills. This was about something much deeper, something Sirius wasn't sure he was ready to face. A soft creak behind him made him tense, but he relaxed when he saw Remus stepping into the room. You're brooding, Remus said with a tired smirk. Sirius huffed. I don't brood. Remus raised an eyebrow. Right. You just sit in the dark, staring at nothing, looking like you want to punch the universe. Sirius rolled his eyes. Fine. Maybe I am brooding. Remus sat down across from him. I heard what happened with Dumbledore. Sirius exhaled sharply. Of course you did. He ran a hand through his hair. It's all happening too fast, Moony. He's just a kid. Remus looked toward the closed door of Harry's room. Not just any kid. That doesn't mean he has to be dragged into this war. Remus sighed. You know that's not true. He was in this war the moment Voldemort marked him. Sirius clenched his jaw. I won't let him go through what James and Lily did. Remus hesitated. You can't protect him from everything. Sirius's expression darkened. Watch me. The next morning, Harry was already awake when Sirius stepped into the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, flipping through an old spellbook, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sirius poured himself some coffee, studying him. You look serious. Harry glanced up. I was thinking about what Dumbledore said. Sirius tensed but kept his voice calm. And Harry exhaled. I think he's right. I need to know more. Sirius sat down across from him. You already know more than most Aurors. Harry shook his head. Not just about fighting. About everything. Magic, history, Voldemort. There's so much I don't know. He hesitated. So, I want to go to Hogwarts. Sirius stiffened. No. Harry frowned. Sirius. I said no. Harry clenched his fists. You're always telling me to be ready. How am I supposed to do that if I don't even know what I'm up against? Sirius leaned forward. You think Hogwarts is safe? That place is a damn target. Harry's voice rose. Then where am I supposed to go? I can't just hide forever. The air between them crackled with tension. Sirius's eyes flashed with frustration, but beneath it was something else. Fear. Remus stepped into the room before Sirius could respond. Actually, I might have an idea. They both turned to him. Remus crossed his arms. Hogwarts is too risky, but Harry's right. He needs to learn more. There are other ways. Sirius narrowed his eyes. What are you suggesting? Remus smirked. A little private education. With the right people. Harry blinked. Like what? A secret training program. Remus nodded. Exactly. If Hogwarts is dangerous, we take matters into our own hands. Sirius raised an eyebrow. And who do you propose teaches him? Remus shrugged. Me. You. A few trusted allies. We bring in the best. We teach him everything he needs to know, but on our terms. Harry's eyes lit up. That could work. Sirius leaned back, considering it. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than sending Harry into Dumbledore's control. Finally, he nodded. All right, but if we do this, we do it right. Remus grinned. Then let's get started. And just like that, Harry's real training began. The morning sun barely peeked through the heavy curtains when Harry woke up, his muscles already aching from the previous day's training. Sirius and Remus hadn't wasted a second. The moment Harry had agreed to their plan, his life had shifted into something new. Something more intense than he had ever imagined. No more light dueling sessions in hidden alleys. No more casual spell practice between runs through the countryside. This was different. This was real. Harry groaned as he pushed himself out of bed, his arms stiff from spell drills. His room was a mess of old books, potion ingredients, and half-dismantled enchanted objects. They weren't just teaching him spells anymore. They were forcing him to understand magic at its core. He dressed quickly, then made his way downstairs. Sirius was already at the kitchen table, sipping coffee while flipping through a worn-out parchment. "You're late," Sirius muttered, not looking up. Harry grabbed an apple from the table. "It's barely sunrise." Sirius smirked. "Exactly. If Voldemort attacks at dawn, you think he's going to wait for you to get a full 8 hours." Harry rolled his eyes but took a bite of the apple anyway. He was too hungry to argue. Remus entered the room a moment later, levitating several heavy books behind him. "I've put together today's lesson plan." Sirius groaned. "You and your lesson plans." Harry swallowed his bite. "What are we doing?" Remus set the books down with a thud. "Advanced dueling tactics, nonverbal magic, and defensive spell theory. And after lunch, we'll work on breaking enchantments." Harry blinked. "You're serious?" Sirius grinned. "No, I'm serious." Remus sighed. "He walked right into that one." Harry groaned. Every single time. The morning was brutal. Harry found himself dodging hexes before he had even finished his breakfast. Remus had set up an enchanted training ground in an abandoned part of the safe house, filling it with illusions, traps, and defensive wards. Again, Remus shouted as Harry barely managed to dodge a stunning spell. Harry gritted his teeth, rolling behind an overturned table. He raised his wand, focusing. If he wanted to beat Voldemort one day, he had to be better. Faster. He flicked his wrist and cast Expelliarmus, but Sirius batted it away effortlessly. "Too predictable." Sirius barked. "You think a Death Eater's gonna stand there and let you take their wand?" Harry gritted his teeth. "Fine." He shifted his stance, letting his instincts take over. He feinted to the right before flicking his wand in a sharp arc. A burst of white light shot forward. A shield charm? No. At the last second, he twisted his wrist, transforming it into a silent stupefy. Sirius barely dodged in time. He blinked, impressed. Remus smirked. "Clever." Harry smirked too, just before a sudden Petrificus Totalis slammed into his back. He hit the ground with a grunt, frozen in place. Sirius crossed his arms. "Never get cocky, kid." Harry groaned. That afternoon, the training shifted to something different. Sirius led Harry to a dusty old room, its walls lined with enchanted objects. Some hummed with raw magic. Others were cracked, broken remnants of cursed artifacts. Harry frowned. "What's this?" "Your next lesson," Sirius said, shutting the door behind them. "You need to know how to fight more than just wizards." Harry raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Remus knelt down, placing an old, cracked mirror on the floor. It shimmered unnaturally. "Magic isn't just spells and duels," he explained. "It's objects. Enchantments. Things that can twist reality itself." Sirius nudged the mirror with his boot. "This, for example, is cursed. Touch it wrong, and it'll show you your worst nightmare so vividly you'll forget what's real." Harry stared at it. "And you want me to break it?" Remus shook his head. "Not break. Disarm." Harry swallowed. "Okay, how?" Sirius smirked. "That's for you to figure out." Harry sighed, kneeling in front of the mirror. He could see his reflection, but something about it felt off. His hands were steady, but his gut told him that if he touched it directly, something bad would happen. He exhaled slowly. "What kind of curse is on it?" Remus nodded approvingly. "Good. Always assess before acting. This mirror feeds on fear. If you look too long, it'll trap you in your own mind." Harry shivered. "So how do I stop it?" Sirius grinned. "Trial and error." Harry gave him a flat look. "You're the worst teacher ever." Sirius laughed. "And yet you're learning." Harry sighed again and turned back to the mirror. He raised his wand, considering his options. He needed to disrupt the curse without triggering it. Then it hit him. Instead of using a destructive spell, he tried something different. He cast a gentle finite incantatum, focusing not on overpowering the magic, but unraveling it. The mirror shuddered, its surface rippling like water. A moment later, the shimmer faded. The curse was gone. Sirius and Remus exchanged glances. Remus smiled. Not bad. Harry grinned. So, I passed. Sirius patted his shoulder. You lived. That's a pass in my book. That night, Harry collapsed onto his bed, exhausted but satisfied. Every day, he was learning something new. Something important. He wasn't just training to fight anymore. He was training to win. Harry's muscles still ached from the previous day's training, but that didn't matter. As soon as he woke up, he was on his feet, wand in hand, ready for whatever Sirius and Remus threw at him next. He was getting stronger, faster, sharper. This wasn't just learning anymore. This was survival. He made his way downstairs, finding Sirius and Remus already deep in conversation. A third figure stood between them, someone Harry hadn't met before. The man was tall and lean, with sharp features and piercing gray eyes. He had a quiet intensity about him, something that put Harry immediately on edge. Sirius looked up. Harry, meet Alastair Moody. Harry's breath hitched. Mad-Eye Moody, the famous Auror. The man who had survived more dark wizards than most people could count. The man with the magical, whirling eye that was currently locked onto Harry with unsettling precision. So, Moody growled, his voice rough like gravel. This is the boy. Harry straightened his back. I'm Harry. Moody's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. You've got your father's eyes. But I'm not here to talk about your parents. I'm here to see if you're worth my time. Harry's fingers curled around his wand. Try me. Sirius grinned. Careful, Moody. He's been trained by the best. Moody gave a dry chuckle. We'll see about that. Within minutes, Harry found himself standing in the backyard, wand raised, with Moody pacing around him like a predator circling prey. Show me what you've got, boy, Moody muttered. Harry didn't hesitate. He fired a stunning spell directly at him, only for Moody to vanish in an instant. Harry barely had time to duck before a curse slammed into the tree behind him. Rule number 1. Moody's voice growled from somewhere behind him. Never assume the first attack will land. Harry spun around, throwing up a shield charm just as another hex came flying toward him. The force of it nearly knocked him back, but he held firm. Moody's eye whirled as he studied Harry's stance. Not bad. Harry didn't wait for another attack. He flicked his wand, sending a wave of disarming magic toward Moody, but the Auror sidestepped it effortlessly. Predictable, Moody barked. Come on, Potter, think. You think Death Eaters play fair? Harry clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. Think. Adapt. Be unpredictable. He darted sideways, kicking up dirt as he moved. He fired a spell not directly at Moody, but at the ground beneath him, causing a blast of dust and debris to erupt into the air. Moody hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough time for Harry to strike. He twisted his wrist, casting Expelliarmus at an angle. Moody barely had time to deflect it before Harry sent another spell his way. This one hit its mark. Moody staggered back, his wand momentarily slipping from his fingers before he caught it again. His magical eye locked onto Harry with something that almost looked like approval. Well, well, Moody grunted. You might actually survive this war after all. Sirius clapped from the sidelines. Told you he's good. Moody snorted. Good's not enough. He needs to be better. He turned back to Harry, his expression unreadable. You're fast, boy. But fast won't save you when the killing curse comes flying. You need to be ruthless. You need to be smart. Harry swallowed. Then teach me. Moody studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, Potter. Let's see if you can handle the real lessons. The next few weeks were brutal. Moody didn't hold back. He drilled Harry harder than Sirius or Remus ever had. Constant dueling. Constant awareness. Constant paranoia. Constant vigilance. Moody roared whenever Harry let his guard down for even a second. Harry barely had time to sleep, let alone breathe. He learned how to recognize ambushes before they happened, how to throw off tracking spells, how to resist the imperious curse. Sirius and Remus watched from the sidelines, impressed but wary. You sure about this? Remus asked one evening as they observed Harry dodging Moody's hexes in the rain. Sirius exhaled. He needs this. He's strong, but he needs to be stronger. Remus frowned. He's 14. Sirius's jaw tightened. And Voldemort doesn't care. Remus didn't argue, because he knew Sirius was right. One night, Harry sat by the fire, exhaustion weighing heavy on his bones. His wand hand ached. His body was bruised. But his mind was sharper than ever. Sirius sat beside him, handing him a cup of tea. "You're doing good, kid," he murmured. Harry gave a tired chuckle. "I don't feel good." Sirius smirked. "That means it's working." Harry stared into the flames. "Do you think I'm ready?" Sirius hesitated. "You're getting there." Harry nodded slowly. He had no illusions about what lay ahead. Voldemort was out there, growing stronger. The war was coming. And when it did, Harry wouldn't run. He would be ready. Harry had thought he was getting used to the brutal training, but Moody had other ideas. It started with sleep deprivation. Moody would wake him at random hours of the night, casting hexes at him the moment his eyes opened. If Harry didn't react fast enough, he'd end up flat on his back. If he managed to defend himself, Moody only pushed harder. Then came the stealth drills. Moody would drop Harry in the middle of the forest at dusk with only his wand and one objective: get back to Grimmauld Place without being detected. The first time, Harry was caught within 20 minutes. The second time, he lasted an hour. By the fifth attempt, he had figured out how to mask his presence, how to move without sound, and how to disappear into the shadows. Sirius watched all of this with a mix of pride and concern. "You're turning him into a soldier," he muttered to Moody one evening. Moody didn't even blink. "I'm turning him into a survivor." The next major test came when Moody had Remus join the training. Harry stood in the backyard, wand at the ready, facing both Remus and Moody. The Aurus Magical I spun wildly, taking in every movement. "No warnings, Potter," Moody growled. "You're up against two trained fighters now. If you hesitate, you lose." Harry barely had time to register the words before Remus moved. His former professor was fast, faster than Harry had ever seen before. He flicked his wand, sending a disarming spell at Harry. At the same time, Moody launched a stunner from the opposite direction. Harry threw himself into a roll, dodging both. He came up on one knee and fired a silent Expelliarmus at Remus, who deflected it with ease. "Good," Remus said, circling Harry. "But you'll have to do better than that." Moody barked a spell, and the ground beneath Harry exploded. He barely managed to leap aside before a second curse came his way. It was relentless. Attack after attack. No chance to breathe. No chance to think. Harry ducked, dodged, countered. His body moved on instinct. His mind raced ahead, predicting, adapting. He had to be unpredictable. He had to be faster. Then he saw an opening. Remus lunged toward him, wand raised, and Harry feinted left, only to twist at the last second and cast a blinding flash of light in Moody's direction. The Auror cursed, his magical eye momentarily disrupted. Harry spun, flicking his wand toward Remus. Protego. He redirected the force of the spell back at him, sending Remus stumbling. And then Expelliarmus. Remus's wand flew from his grip. A split second later, Harry felt a wand-tip press against his back. Moody's gruff voice rumbled behind him. "Not bad, Potter. But you forgot about me." Harry closed his eyes, cursing himself. He had been so focused on Remus that he had left himself wide open. Moody lowered his wand. "You won, but you still lost. That's the kind of mistake that gets you killed." Harry let out a slow breath, nodding. Lesson learned. That night, Harry sat alone in his room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked different than he had a year ago. His face was sharper, his eyes more intense. There was a weight in his expression that hadn't been there before. A knock at the door. Sirius stepped in, his usual smirk absent. "Rough day." Harry let out a tired laugh. "You could say that." Sirius leaned against the wall, watching him for a long moment. "You're pushing yourself harder than ever." Harry met his godfather's gaze. "I have to." Sirius exhaled. "I know, and I wish you didn't." Harry frowned. "What do you mean?" Sirius ran a hand through his hair. He hesitated, then sighed. "You're 14, Harry. You should be worrying about Quidditch and homework, not battle strategy." Harry clenched his fists. Voldemort isn't going to wait until I'm older. Sirius's eyes darkened. I know. Harry swallowed. I don't want to just survive, Sirius. I want to win. Sirius stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Then we'll make sure you do. Harry's body was running on nothing but sheer willpower at this point. Every muscle ached, every movement felt like dragging himself through molasses, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Moody's relentless training was pushing him to his absolute limit, and Harry had learned something crucial. His limit wasn't enough. Every night, he replayed his mistakes in his head. Every time Moody outmaneuvered him. Every time he let his emotions get the better of him. Every time he left himself open. He couldn't afford mistakes. Sirius noticed. He always did. Late one evening, after another brutal sparring session, Harry sat by the window, staring at the darkened street below Grimmauld Place. His hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. He clenched them into fists. Sirius entered the room quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. He set one down in front of Harry before taking a sip from his own. You look like hell, Sirius said. Harry gave a weak chuckle. Feel like it too. Sirius sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You've got that look in your eyes, kid. The same one I used to see in James's when he thought he had something to prove. Harry exhaled through his nose. Maybe I do. Sirius leaned forward, studying him. You think pushing yourself until you break is going to change anything? Harry's grip tightened around the cup. I think if I'm not good enough, people will die. Sirius went quiet. He wanted to tell Harry he was wrong. That it wasn't all on him. That he wasn't alone. But the truth was Harry wasn't wrong. Not entirely. After a long moment, Sirius set his cup down. All right, he said. If you want to be better, then let's stop pretending you're just some kid training for a fight. Harry looked up. Sirius's eyes were sharp. You want to win, Harry? Then it's time you started thinking like a warrior. The next morning, Sirius took over Harry's training. Moody's methods had been effective, but Sirius had something else in mind. Something that played to Harry's real strengths. You're quick, Sirius said as he led Harry to an open field beyond the forest. You've got solid instincts. But instincts alone don't win wars. Harry wiped sweat from his forehead. Then what does? Sirius smirked. Cunning. Harry frowned. That sounds more like something Snape would say. Sirius let out a bark of laughter. Yeah, well, for once he wouldn't be wrong. He turned to Harry, his expression growing serious. You need to stop playing fair. Stop fighting like a student. You're not dueling for house points. You're fighting people who will do anything to kill you. Harry nodded slowly. Today, Sirius continued, we're going to stop thinking like Aurors. His smirk returned, dangerous and wild. And start thinking like marauders. The first rule of marauder-style combat? Surprise is your greatest weapon. Sirius and Harry faced each other, wands drawn. No dueling rules, Sirius said. No warning. Just get the advantage, by any means necessary. Harry barely had time to process the words before Sirius flicked his wand. But Harry was ready. Instead of dodging backward like he normally would, he lunged forward. Sirius's spell missed by an inch, and before he could fire another, Harry rolled into the dirt, grabbing a handful and flinging it directly at Sirius's face. Sirius swore, staggering back as dust got into his eyes. Harry used the distraction. He moved. Quick, unpredictable, taking the angle Sirius wouldn't expect, diving low instead of standing his ground. Expelliarmus! Sirius's wand flew from his fingers. The fight was over in seconds. There was a beat of silence. Then Sirius started laughing. Harry, still catching his breath, gave him a bewildered look. What's so funny? Sirius wiped his face, grinning. You cheated. Harry hesitated. You said there were no rules. Sirius clapped him on the shoulder. Exactly. Harry realized what Sirius had been trying to teach him. Magic wasn't just about spells. It was about strategy. For the next week, the lessons changed completely. Harry learned how to use his surroundings, how to manipulate perception, how to outthink his opponents instead of just outdueling them. Instead of just blocking curses, he was learning how to redirect them. Instead of just reacting, he was learning how to predict movements. He became faster, smarter, unpredictable, and Sirius pushed him even further. One night, Sirius handed Harry a blank parchment. Your next assignment, he said, is to plan a prison break. Harry blinked. "Eh, what?" Sirius grinned. "If you can figure out how to break into Azkaban, you'll know how to get out of any trap Voldemort ever puts you in." Harry stared at the parchment, then slowly smirked. "Game on."